Welcome to another episode of the Graphic Sales Stories podcast. I'm Tom Stearns.
I'm Peter Cleary. Hello. On this podcast, we break down the story behind this positive intent. So our stories are meant to be funny, also instructional. This one's probably a little bit more instructional because just want to go through the way I run a meeting, but there's a lot of history behind it. So we're going to go a little bit into the story about how this came about and a little bit of history about to it. But Tom,
Yeah,
see the pictures up there?
Yeah, I want to give you a quick reminder of the story we're talking about. Again, positive intent. This is a lot of Peter's hands here, but we'll come back to that. But let's talk a little bit about how this is something that falls into company culture. We're going to talk a lot about culture throughout our stories in the future and meetings too. We promise not to bore you, but company culture really lives in the meeting. The bigger the company, actually, the more the meeting plays into how your culture is executed. People don't love meetings, but this is where a lot of business, at least internally, is taking place. So if you're not deliberate about how you want your meetings to run, then your culture is not going to be lived out. And this is one story in that realm. So, Peter, tell
I
us a little bit about how you see
100
it.
yeah, 100% agree with you. And a lot of this story basically comes in the need to set this because a past life, past job, the culture was pretty bad, right? You go into meetings and people just arguing and yelling at you. So there's no respect there, right? So there's no people are not treating people with positive intent or basically giving them the benefit of the doubt or listening. I think I've said before, I've talked about Akamai. When I was looking for another job, I was really focused on culture. In the first place I saw it was in team meetings. I'm like, oh, they're listening to the person who is cutting people off, jumping in, they're allowing them to talk, they're listening to their ideas, they're iterating on those ideas. And a great meeting is when you walk out and you're like, that wasn't somebody specifically telling you what to do. It is like, hey, this is what the next steps are. It was a team environment and everybody has respected it for their opinion, and that's huge. So you do get, like, the meetings is where the culture kind of comes to fruition, like how you're treated and you're respected in those meetings. And this story comes about because that wasn't happening a lot. And I'll be honest, I kind of fell into the trap. So I probably wasn't also on my best behavior because you're in that environment of conflict. And so there were times so you just get wrapped up in that environment, in that culture, like this is not healthy.
So, Peter, this story really comes directly out of a set of rules you set up for positive intent. So, take us through what those rules are, and then I'd like to know also how you execute those with the teams you've run, and
Yeah.
how long have you had this as a part of your, the culture of your teams, anyways.
Yeah, that's a good point. So if you want to bring up the comic, I got the 1, 2, 3, and I kind of walk through that. So the first thing is to assume positive intent, right? Make sure everybody there wants to do the right thing. So you have to assume, if the person you're talking to, if I'm talking to Tom, that he wants to do the right thing. So whatever conversation we're into, whatever the meeting's about, we kind of assume that everybody wants what's best for their teams, the company, the customer, so forth. So assume that there's positive intent here. And I gotta tell you, that's really important, and we'll get some stories, but some people go in just really not assuming that. They're really going in like, you're my nemesis. You can't go into a call like that, right?
So number one basically is like, let's just assume everybody is here and they want to better the company, the
Yeah.
outcome of what we're here to talk about. So that's assuming positive intent.
That's assuming positive. Like, don't come in saying, like, I don't like Tom. Whatever he says, I'm going against it. And he's not trying to do what's best for me, or whatever personal reasons they have or emotional reactions they have. But just assume we want to do well for whatever call, project, or program we're running on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
what's number two?
Number two is you. This is very, very important. I think your opinion has to be based off of facts and experiences. It cannot be an emotional, right? People have a very emotional reaction to a lot of things. So, okay, what is this based off of? Do you have data on any, about why you might be disagreeing with the direction we're going. Experiences are great. Like, okay, can you give me an example of where this happened and that you've had an experience with it that you're tying this to? Do you have, which, I always say to people, the facts are the most important. Like, give me a fact that drives decision, right? So where's the data behind this? And in lieu of certain situations, you can't always have that data and facts. Well, then give me experiences, and then we can work with that. Like, how have you experienced something like this in the past that might influence the change of that opinion? But understand the difference. And I think today's world is what's a fact and what's not a fact. And this is, can you actually pinpoint something specifically that is uncontroversial? This is 100% a fact and not an opinion, or quite effectively, is it an emotion, right? I heard, this is one thing you'll hear in calls. Well, a guy who works for me is having problems doing this. I'm like, well, can we get the exact information? Let's not run on rumor or emotions. And so this one is basically come in with make sure understand that your opinion has fact and experiences behind it.
So we've got come in with a positive intent.
Yep.
Two, like bring real data, and let's focus on facts as opposed to emotions. Then what's the third one, Peter?
The third one is be willing to change your opinion, right? So you're going to be open to change your opinion because you're expecting to change somebody else's, but you've also going to be willing. Okay, let me listen, active listening. Let me listen to what you have to say, understand and that data. Again, it's all three tied together. Okay, I know Tom when I'm talking to him, he might be disagreeing with me, but he's got a positive intent. He's an intelligent person. Let me hear what he has to say, and let me adjust my thinking. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people do get that. Hey, if I change my mind, it shows weakness or non-intelligence, whatever. And that's not the case, right? It's like, okay, if we go into this, and like I said, I think the best outcomes are when you kind of walk away with like, that wasn't anybody's, first thought or direction. It is a team group. And I'm like, I have no idea where this idea came from, but it is the best one going forward. So, making sure that when I'm talking to Tom, I know Tom has positive intent. I have positive intent. I have facts and experiences to drive on my opinions. It's not emotion. And I'm willing to say, okay, maybe, you have actually, it's a good point. So let's think about that. Is there give and take or a better way to do things? And that's really just, you want to have that open conversation in healthy conflict conversations. Like, it's okay to disagree, but it's not okay to argue. It's not okay to shut down and put a barrier up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know the fourth one is a bit of a joke, but like,
well, it is a bit of a joke, but it's also true. I'm like, listen, if you're not going to do those, there's no point of me, like, I have been on calls where you just kind of shut down. I'm like, okay, Tom, all right, good, thank you. Yeah. And you move on. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do nothing with that because that person didn't listen. That's the story I have is that. I'm like, there's nothing I can do here. There's absolutely nothing. This person shut down, like, is not listening, is completely emotional, is just yelling and moving forward and just, okay, if you're not willing to listen or, hear me out or give me data and facts and have a good conversation, I can't do anything.
This is like, I remember when we were talking about this, and this was purely your idea, this story. And I just loved it because I looked back at sort of like our long careers and today, all the meetings we have. And there are meetings that are like, hey, they're presentation meetings. There are just update meetings. But then the most important meetings are the ones where we're trying to collaborate and learn something together. And what most and nobody likes a long meeting or a meeting for meeting's sake. But when you have a meeting where we're trying to accomplish something, it needs a framework like this. Like, we need to know, like, hey, but this comes from leadership, right? This is literally a cultural top-down or manager-down kind of situation, that when we're going to have a meeting of this context where we're here to work together, then one, guys, let's assume positive intent. Two, let's bring the data. So we're talking about something factual. And then three, let's have an open mind and get somewhere. And with just sort of like anything, the leadership sort of has to set the precedent. So so the question is for you, because this is your structure, which I'm going to steal and take to all my clients, of course, is how did you get your team functioning?
Yeah, So in my last job, I had a lot of people. So I had different groups, probably like 5 different groups of people I managed over. And so we internally into my team, this is something we discussed, and we said this is a way we're going to run meetings. Everybody agree with this, and everybody agreed. And so
Okay.
internally, I could have that control, right? So hey, we created the environment and the culture within that team there was all that positive, and the calls were good. I mean, one of the things that a person who worked for me when she called me up after I left, she's like, your calls were so fun. I'm like, yeah, because we're just there to have to get stuff done, but this is not contentious. But the problem I had was then you go outside my team and I have to work with somebody else. I did have to bring this up like I go in knowing
Mm,
like, okay, meet with Tom. Let me just set this, like, guys, we have to have positive intent. Let's make sure we're using data and experiences, and let's be willing to change. And I had to say that a bunch of times because I knew going in, the history had been like, this is not going to go well. And so it didn't necessarily change that, because you're right, it has to come from the top.
yeah.
Coming over to Akamai, I think I've said that a couple times when I first started, and my team was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That's great. But in all the meetings I've been in, every meeting I've been in, it's like, no, there's no need to reiterate that, because it has the people that are treated with respect from top down.
Yeah.
Leadership is very much treat people with respect, treat you as human beings, and you can have healthy conversations. And so your point about tying this to culture is 100% right. It has to come from top down,
Yeah.
because the environment that I was in before, this is something we had to put out there, because every call was an argument and people yelling at each other.
Yeah, it sounds like these things sound like common sense, like, oh, of course, but it is, you need a good culture to do that. So like everything absolutely is top down. There are some of the clients or some of the companies I've worked in, you see like there's a need to kind of bring the structure, but ones with great leadership already have this, and it's like, well, of
Mhm.
course this is how it's going to run, and it comes to how you hire people, and everybody knows that. But also, it's not a bad idea when you're building your culture, and I work with a lot of scale up, so when you're scaling up, identifying these things for other departments, so you get new leaders that build another team, and maybe they don't get a sense of your culture. Like, it's not a bad idea to document, like, hey, the way we approach meetings here is we've got this general framework, and hopefully the leader that you hired is like, oh, of course I get that, but maybe they don't. And so you kind of set a precedent that we care about our culture, we care about meetings. It's a little bit like the management of meetings themselves. I've got a friend, David Krieger, who runs Sales Roads, and I've when I started, I worked with him briefly back in COVID on a consulting basis, and I had never been in meetings that were so productive. He had a framework, and there was always like one thing, clear action items. There was the natural culture. I think they had intrinsically the positive intent. So there was
Yeah.
always a great attitude. But man, I would say to David, of like, this is, you really know how to run a meeting. It's productive, and you can feel it again, top down
Top down.
company culture. Yeah,
By the,
we live in meetings, so they got to be meaningful, or we're
right.
wasting.
By the way, I do like you're referencing COVID like it's the dark ages. Back in COVID, back in the Middle Ages, back in the dark ages. So I have a story. It is story time. But to set why there was to understand the culture that was put forth by leadership. I remember there was a director meeting in Denver, and we're all there on site, and there's like 20 of us, and there's a VP doing a presentation to us. And I feel bad because I asked the question. The guy answered it. I basically said, "Hey, why? I understand what you're saying, but we're seeing it differently out in the field." And he's like, basically, his answer was, "No, you're not." And then so I was the director of engineering for the Northeast. So the VP of sales of the Northeast, who was basically my partner in going after this, said, "Well, no, I can vouch for me. That's 100% what's happening." The president's in the back of the room, and starts yelling at the vice president and said, "I thought we fixed this." It took one of those like squeeze ball foam things and whipped it at him. And they started arguing in this meeting. I'm like, so that's the environment at the president and VP level, working for each other. This is the environment that that I'm in, right? So that, okay, I guess this is okay that the president is whipping something at his VP and berating him in front of 20 people. So that's the culture that has been set.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's not even the story. That's just setting the precedence of this is the environment.
We laid the groundwork for this.
Yes, this is the environment that we're working in. So we're on this call, and one of my teams, I had this unbelievable IT development team, software development team. They built this application. It was fantastic, and it was the second most used application, homegrown, behind Salesforce.com. So you got everybody in the world, in the company uses Salesforce.com, and then the second most is the application we built from the ground up.
Gotcha.
And then everything else we built that some bought off the shelf. So great product. It had 96% approval rating for the people who used it. It great tool. We're part of what I did. So the company itself was running off of a waterfall approach, and we were doing really more agile. And so I would meet with people that we might be doing something that were affecting their teams and get their approvals. So for quarterly rollouts, I'd say, here's a map for the quarter, here's the sprints we're going to roll out, and this is why we're doing it, and get everybody's buy-off. Whatever reason, there's this guy, and let's call him Tim. Tim is on the call. He says, "Well, I need my ask to be done right away." I'm like, "Well, your ask can't be done because we have to set the foundation. We have to do some infrastructure work, and here's why." He's like, "Nope, it has to be done. I won't approve this." And quite frankly, I didn't need I had everybody else's approval. This is kind of like, this is what we're doing. But I'm trying to be nice. I'm like, "Okay, Tim, this is why we can't do it." He goes, "I'm not going to prove it until you promise me you're going to get it done by the end, by the end of the year." So this is like the fourth quarter. And I'm like, "It won't get done. It can't get done. I'm trying to explain to you that it can't get done." He goes, "Well, I will go to my VP and tell him that I'm not approving this unless you tell me you're going to do it." I go, "Well, I could tell you I could do it, but I'd be lying to you. But I could say, yeah, I got to get it done. I 100% won't get it done. But if that's what you need to hear, I'll tell you I'm going to get it done. But we can't do it. Here's the reason why." He's like, "Nope, you need to tell me you promised me to do it." I go, "If I did that, I'd be lying to you." He goes, "I don't care." I go, "Okay, then we're going to get it done." He's like, "Great, then you have my approval." I'm like, what are we talking about? This guy Tony.
What episode are we in?
What is Piers Tony calling me about? He goes, "I don't know what that was." So I'm like, "I don't either." I'm like, he goes, "I'm completely happy with the way you explain this." He's like, "What you're rolling out is going to have some solve a lot of problems for us that are outside." I'm like, "Oh, great that you have this on your roadmap, but I don't know what Tim was talking about." I'm like, I don't either. So I'm like, "But we got his approval." It's just, but that's the environment. I'm like, "You're not listening." Like to the fourth point, I'm like, I said the fourth point. The fourth point. I can't have this conversation. Like, you're not listening, and you're not. I'm trying to explain to you. You're not giving me reasoning. You're just yelling at me a demand. I'm like, all right, I don't know what to do with this.
That really is the fourth point. I mean, sometimes it's people are not going to change. They're not going to adhere to your culture, and don't burn all your energy trying to get that particular person to change.
Yeah.
In coaching, we look at obviously you want coachable reps. Right.
Yeah.
But you look at the folks, and if the only person that's going to change the behavior is the rep, the person themselves. So as a coach, you kind of look at a matrix. There's the A reps, the B reps, the C reps. The A reps, you kind of leave them alone. The B reps, you're trying to coach up to A reps. The C reps, you're giving the opportunity. But if they don't want to invest and put the energy in, then you don't waste your energy either. It's expensive to coach and train people. So you focus on those that want to get better. And I've worked with many clients, and I'm like, okay, well, that person we've tested, they don't want to change. You're wasting your money asking me to coach that person. Let's move into the folks that want to be coached, and you'll get a lot more production out of them. That sounds like that kind of character.
I think we'll probably get into when we we'll talk a lot about hiring people in the interview process, so forth. I've always said, I'm like, I can teach you anything. I can't teach you to be coachable. I can't that you either come in with that attitude or not, and that's part of the culture, right? That you're looking for. Like, do you fit the culture what we have here, which is, expand and grow, and you have to have a leadership that's willing to allow you to make mistakes, because mistakes allow you to grow. But that's probably for a different
Yeah.
podcast. But
Yeah. Yeah.
to this, they're having that mutual respect for the person on the other end is the most important. Listening to them, making sure, do they feel heard? A lot of times, like, hey, I said my piece. I don't care that we didn't do my idea or went there. Did you listen to me and have a response to me that made me feel heard? I'm like, and that makes you feel good, right? So it's like, okay, I'm not, there's a little frustration that I might not be getting what I needed for, my team or for what I wanted to get done, but I was heard. I understand the reasoning behind it, and so we can move forward. Having in my last job, I heard a lot. It's kind of like that because I said so parent. I'm like, hey, why do we make this decision? There's a lot of information, Peter, that it's on a need to know basis. You don't need to know. I'm like, what? We're not in the military here. Like, there's not some secret plan here. Why can't we understand and pass this information down? So it's a very secretive and boss mentality and bully mentality and in power. Like, hey, I have the power. I know this. This is, don't worry. You just do what I tell you. Like,
Yeah.
I'd like to know what we're doing so I can make some smart decisions.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Some of the best moments in my career, I still reflect back on some great people I worked for, and they had a type of meeting where it was basically to talk about challenges, and it intrinsically followed the positive intent framework, but it was cultural, right? So the president or the VP of sales and marketing, two people, Paul Lean, Peter Wayman, I worked for, we would have particular meetings where we would come in and we would just try to open up and brainstorm challenges. And those meetings were really interesting, right? Everyone's doing stuff all the time, but get a couple of people together, a couple of smart people together and say, look, let's look. And we would look at data. Like Peter Wayman was a data junkie and Paul too. And we would say, like, let's look at our numbers and brainstorm ideas. And we can't, this goes back to it. We were selling a hardware product and we were like, well, what if we had a refurb store? We get product back that's just returned. It's not damaged. Yeah. And we launched the refurb store. That became like 10% of our company revenue for years, so well, even those kind of discussions too.
Well, even look at what we do. Like, we have a past history relationship. It's we're trying to build something, and we both have different ideas. But I think we've been very open, especially writing the stories. I write a story, and you're like, nah, it doesn't work. I'm not getting all defensive. I'm like, okay, well, let's find it work. We're brainstorming, we're trying to figure out, like, okay, what plays here? What's where deal? Every once in a while you'll say, like, what is this line? I'm like, no, I like this line better. You're like, yeah, that's better. Okay, so we have that mutual respect for each other, understanding their strengths and weaknesses, and positive intent, and we have a good conversation. But I think that's because the relationship that we have. And so I will tie this up to, because as we're talking and we're having an intelligent conversation, many of you might not know, but Tom and I went to college together. And back before there was internet, and we probably, in our apartment that we lived in 2 years, there was 5 of us, probably had a very unhealthy culture when it came to arguments. We argued all the time about the stupidest things. But because I would tell you, I think all 5 of us were shut down. My opinion is right, and there was no facts based on it. You try to throw these facts because you think you're an intelligent college kid, and you're just an idiot drinking golden anniversary. You're like, the arguments that we have were really unhealthy, but we've grown and we've understood it. I think that's a foundation for saying, looking at something goes, that didn't work. That's not the way you should be running an argument.
Alcohol sometimes contributed to the poor meetings we ran in the house, for sure. Yeah, we have grown. Going back to the writing we do is, I was writing last night, and I've gotten to, I think we've learned each other's strengths to a degree. And I had a half-baked idea, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to write it because I know it'll trigger something in Peter's mind and he'll rewrite it to be funnier. And and interesting. But like, 6 months ago, I would have stewed over trying to figure out the right way to write them. Like, no, 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 I know what Peter's good at. It's a lot like with other people. You get people are better editors oftentimes, or they need something. One last example story related to this is going back to when I worked for Paul O'Lean. I managed the whole marketing team, and he was the VP of sales and marketing. And we would have like day long meetings to work on strategy.
By the way, those are brutal.
They're-
Any day long meeting is brutal.
Yeah. But I actually, like, we had a great team. We had writers and designers and then marketers, and we'd get everybody together. And I thought of myself a bit as the sacrificial lamb in that it was my meeting to run. But as you probably know, I'm a good collaborator. I'm a good sort of like executor. And what I would do in those meetings is we had planned an outline and all that, but somebody had to get the wheels turning. So I'd get up to the whiteboard and I'd start putting out terrible ideas, or just getting it done. And Paul would stand in the back, and Cheryl at the time, who was, great writer, and Don, and we just had great people, but they needed to react to something. So I'm like, I knew my ideas weren't good or half baked, but it was like, get the wheels turning. And I could only do that. Be, I'm not insecure, but it helps when the people in the room, you can trust, and that everyone has positive intent. And at the end, we all want to get to the best idea.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I think in some ways, you've got the best creative, the funniest ideas. So I kind of approach it that way, like I did then. Like let's get it running, and then Cheryl starts talking, and Don, and then Paul, and everything I wrote on the whiteboard gets erased, and we move on to better stuff.
But it starts. A lot of times you just need to start. It just starts. But I'm gonna as you're telling that story, I just remember we are very New England. We're very sarcastic, and I am very sarcastic, and I attack a little bit. And I remember in a meeting that our VP basically asked to kick it off. Does somebody have an idea about do blah blah blah? And this guy from California threw out his idea, and I just go, "Well, that's an idea." Got to laugh, but I did notice. I'm like, I shut him down. Like, he did not really contribute. I'm like, yeah, that's I. But I felt good because I got to laugh. But I should have been like, I should have realized. I'm like, you know what? It was brave of him to be the first guy to throw it out there, and I just kind of mocked him. But sometimes I go for the laugh rather than the watch around. And I apologize.
Yeah,
I apologize.
You're often misunderstood too. For anybody that like we've known each other for 35 years or whatever. People that don't know you well enough don't realize that none of that is meant the way it's that sarcastic New England thing.
There is a positive intent.
Like, Peter,
there is
they don't know you well enough to kind of get that that's a joke and you really actually care about. So
yes, my wife is always, could you just not tonight with the party we're going to? Could you just not? Anyway, that's more of a.
You like to entertain yourself, but I know your intentions are good.
Yes, positive intent. I have positive intent.
Let's take a look at this is the part of the podcast that we got to look at the art, which is just amazing. Our illustrator artist, Eli Firestone, is just so great. But let's zero in on a couple of things. Obviously, it looks just amazing. This is speaking of our college roommates. Eli really put this front and center. We're like, hey, could you throw? Eli's like, what do you want the address on the building to be? We like to pay attention to the details. So, a building, 548.
I do like that. A building.
A building.
Yeah, with a little logo there. Yep. And
548.
That.
If you want to find
a building.
That was our address. Now hands, like Eli's amazing at faces, of course, but I mean, look at the way he draws hands.
The amazing thing that we've learned, and Tom and I actually just talked about this last night, is I don't know. Like, we write the story, I'm like, I don't know how he's going to do this, and then all of a sudden he pops this out. I'm like, that's genius. That's exactly how it does. So last night we were talking about doing something for one of our cartoons, and Tom and I basically realized, I'm like, well, this is going to be something that's going to be more drawn than his story. So let's just have Eli's got the idea. Let him do it because he's going to come up better than anything that we could have come up with.
Yeah, we're really wrestling with it. We're like, what are we doing? We got the genius of Eli that can let's just share what we're trying to accomplish here.
His
And
artistry is fantastic.
pretty,
Yeah.
This one he definitely, he labored over, like it's problem solving for him. And just to
By the way, if
take,
I want to go back to that, I do notice he does this with me, and I think Eli has some type of something wrong, something against me. Go back to the close up because he's always got my shirt stretched like I'm a big fat guy. That's what I'm like. Am I wearing my shirts too tight? I also looked at him like I don't think they're pulling that much. But anyway, no, just joking. Like, yeah.
I thought it was your six pack. I'm like, wow,
yeah.
Look at how ripped Peter's become.
Yes.
All that hockey.
I think earlier we talked about our college days, so I don't think that's a six pack.
Yeah, six pack under your shirt, full of beer. Love the props, right? These are all nods to Eli. Eli's planting jokes.
Yes.
Peter's diploma.
$4, and it's not signed, so obviously I didn't graduate.
That's great. Again, going back to I think Eli has figured out, like, portraiture is so hard. Look at that. That looks exactly like you. It's a face you make. Got the hair. I'm not always so contemplative. By the way, you didn't even notice my beard is shaved.
I did notice. I did notice.
You just don't care enough to.
No. I noticed when you shave for your costume, your Halloween costume. So.
That's right. But look at these faces. I mean, so just amazing stuff. So yeah, big nod to Eli. Incredible work here. I hope you all appreciate it. Right? We're not using AI. Right? This is Eli, and this is why you see the stories periodically, because he labors over them for a week. So I just love the art. The art is just amazing.
The color he chooses, the art palette, the background, the detail. It is amazing. He's truly an artist, and it's. I think that's the value of our stories are awesome. They're great, but they're really taken to life by Eli. I mean, it really is hitting that graphic novel. And depending on when you hear this, we have a comic coming out for Halloween that I just love the way he did that artistry style on that one.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. So, yeah, I think that concludes our podcast here. Thanks for tuning in, and keep reading, and send us any comments and feedback you have.
Yes, and do we do this? I see people going this. Hit the like button. Hit the like button.
Like and share.
Is that us, or is that something else? Is that a difference?
No, that's right. If you're seeing this on YouTube, there's the subscribe, like, share thing down there. If you're watching on our blog, go to YouTube and share it. Go to LinkedIn and share it. Tell everybody how great we are.
Yes, we we'd like to make some money off of this, please. Put that in.
Yeah, or hire me. I'm a consultant, so if you need some help with your scaling business, sales and marketing, I'm your.
Or buy from Akamai. All right.
Yes. All right.